Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Day 2 of the 2022 Government Contract Pricing Summit. Please welcome to the stage Al Boykin and Charlie Williams.
Number two. Hey, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hey, welcome to Day 2 of the 2022 Government Contract Pricing Summit. How about that weather yesterday? Did y'all, the sun showed up, huh? That was a good thing.
Hey, Al, I'm trying to see if we got any missing seats out, or empty seats out there, because I'm worried they may have, someone might still be out there.
Well, I think the beach is closed today, so
okay.
that shouldn't be an issue.
So don't run out to the beach, right?
So, y'all, we had a great day yesterday. Didn't we have a great day?
Awesome.
Yeah. How many of y'all attended the reception yesterday? Last night, had a couple of glasses
Good food.
of wine, maybe 1, 2. Yeah, 3,
Who's
maybe.
counting?
I don't know. So Charlie, hey, tell me. So we had some great conversations yesterday. What really stood out for you?
Well, I heard a lot of comments about our keynote presentation from Joy White.
Yeah. She really brought it.
So Joy's a dear friend of mine, but boy, I tell you, what she's doing in Space Command is just awesome. And if we aren't keyed in and clued in to the very significant importance of the work that they do each and every day in Space Command, we're missing the boat.
Yeah.
And by the way, guess what? This afternoon, you're going to hear from a gentleman named Major General Cameron Holt. And I think he'll really emphasize the significance of the threat that those Space Command folks are worried about.
Yeah, and so when you really think about this theme that we have this year, cultivating agile solutions, what I heard from Joy yesterday is that, it really is a mission imperative that we need to think through what are the best avenues that's going to enable us to get the best out of our acquisition situations, because there are some critical things that are coming up, and we just really have to put our thoughts, our minds, and our whole team together. When I'm talking about a team, Charlie, I'm talking about, the military, the civilians, industry folks. We got to make sure that we bring it. Academia. We got to make sure that we bring everybody to the dance.
Collaboration and synergy, right?
Absolutely. So, the other thing is, so we have these 3 think tanks. There's a think tank that's happening each and every day of the event. And yesterday we had a think tank from the Baker Tilly folks that talked about new policy updates and compliance. And these are ways that's going to enable us from a policy perspective to make sure that we meet the measure of what the intent is. Yeah, we got to make sure that we meet the measure of law. But at the end of the day, the policies are there to help us make sure that we're consistent, to make sure that we're staying on track with what we need to do. Yeah.
Don't forget, wait a minute, I got to do this. Mike Wooten sat here and said, the baby boomers need to expire. Didn't he say that? Did you hear that? Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. But the point is, go ahead.
So are you in that?
I'm not going to say it. I'm not.
You're a baby boomer, right?
Why? Why do I have to be a baby boomer?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I like to consider. Am I a millennium? No.
Is that what you are?
No, I guess I'm a baby boomer too.
Right,
but it's all good.
Whatever.
It's all good.
But Mike
I
painted,
feel like that.
But he painted a picture on us, man. He said, look, sometimes in order for change to occur, folks have to just get out of the way of themselves. And when we get into this issue of emerging technology and how we transform our business through emerging technology, it's going to be a lot of you that are making a difference, making the changes that we need to be a more efficient acquisition, contracting, and pricing community.
Yeah. And I tell you, I think that the technology piece is so critical, and we're going to continue that conversation today. I guarantee you that conversation will come up in our panel this morning. The panel this morning, I'm really excited about the folks that are going to be having that conversation. We have Army, Navy, we got Space Force.
That's right.
We have industry.
That's right. Well, why don't
Yeah.
you just go on and introduce them, man? I'm gonna get out of the way and let
Wait,
you.
wait.
You sure?
We got a few announcements we need to do, right?
You don't.
Oh, you want me to do that?
You want to take care of that?
Okay, I can handle
I'll help
that.
you, man. No. All right. Remember Q&A in your in your app. Don't forget to put the Q&A in your app for the panel.
Yeah, and also, we had a couple of questions coming up about the presentations. So the presentations will be made available to you. So if you go to your app, there's a place there that you can download those presentations as well. And they'll be available, I think, 90 days,
right?
After the event. So you'll have access to the presentations that you're hearing as well.
And don't forget, this event will occur next year, right out here in San Diego. And so if you want to register early at the table, at the welcome table out there,
Yeah.
please do. I'm told there's going to be a fairly significant discount that comes with that early registration. So if you do that now, you'll have opportunity to get into that discount.
All right. So Charlie, if you'll make sure see if they're ready, and I'll go ahead and introduce this panel, and we'll get this party started. So it's my honor really to introduce a good friend, Stu Haslick. I've known Stu for so many years, even when he was in the Air Force. And so Stu is going to be the moderator for our panel this morning. He in turn will allow the panelists to introduce themselves as they have their opening dialogue and conversations. After retiring from senior executive ranks in 2020, Stu launched what he calls the Stu Haslick Solutions LLC, where he assists businesses in the federal space. His last position was with the Army. He was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Procurement. And he was also a U.S. Ability I Commissioner. Throughout Stu's career, he has been instrumental and been a mentor to so many folks, including myself. I knew Stu when I was stationed out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base out in Dayton, Ohio. And yeah, got some Ohio folks out there. It's all good. At least one, right? Okay, that's all good. So I've known Stu for so many years, and even when I was on the air staff up at the Pentagon. So he's helped a lot of folks in government and industry throughout their careers. While he was in the Army, he was responsible for over 270 different Army contracting offices throughout the world, with contracts over $100 billion that he had to manage. And also about 8,000 different military, civilian folks that he had to oversee as well. So Stu also served in leadership in the Army Corps of Engineers, the Air Force, and also the Office of the Secretary of Defense. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Stu and the panel out. Please give a nice warm welcome to Stu Haslick and the executive panel this morning. Thank you, sir.
Well, good morning. I'm glad to see some folks got up early, and I know we have many that are participating virtually that may on the East Coast be having their lunch right now as they listen in on this conversation. But I am humbled to be here on stage with the leadership that are here to my left, because they epitomize what our industry is all about. You know, we have pricing leadership, we have the contracting leadership, different command leadership in this. But I know that all of you are participating in this summit because you want to hone your craft. You want to learn. You want to meet others that have the same challenges and trials that you're going through from day to day. But you want to know, how are they overcoming them? What are they placed as their most challenging, and what are the thought leaders thinking? Because one of the things that I always thought about when I was you sitting out there in the audience, looking up here on the stage at this leadership, is to say, ooh, I someday want to be in that seat. How did they get there? How did they arrive? But I also, more importantly, said, I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. I'm working hard. Thank goodness that my management allowed me to participate in this summit so that I can learn. But I know many of you aren't getting that full breath that you deserve, that you woke up early this morning and did emails and did work, maybe back to that source selection or back to the preparation of that proposal. You'll go this evening before you go to bed and you'll do the same. And I applaud you for that because you are honing your craft. You are here to become even better at it. And I recall many years ago, you know, if you've read anything from Norm Augustine, when he was the CEO of Martin Marietta, and they were doing the merger with Lockheed back in the early 90s. And he was a prolific speaker. And one thing he said to a small group of us that were in contracting, he stood there and he says, you know, many people say that acquisition and contracting is not rocket science. He goes, I am a rocket scientist and I don't understand it. It's hard work. It's complex. And so with that, I know many of you are having to go from fight to fight. Or in the Army, we say from foxhole to foxhole. And you don't have time to possibly write down those lessons learned or those things that you think could be improved upon and send them to your leadership. This morning, you have that opportunity. Do not be silent. Speak up. Let them know what's going well and what you're confused about. Or do they even know that when your laptop goes down, it takes you 60 minutes to log back in? Do they know what it's like when you're dealing with a difficult opponent or adversary on the other side? Because I never saw them as opponents, adversaries. And Drew will tell you, we're partners. And we can get and gain so much through trust. And trust in each other's systems and trusting in each other. Because we are not devious. We are all in this together in this fight against our adversaries. And I know when you hear from Cameron Holt this afternoon, he'll remind us all about what is going on in the world today and how important your positions are in that. So the ground rules, as Al said, we're going to go down the line here and introduce. They will introduce themselves, a little bit about themselves, and then it will come back. And then I'll allow each one of them to share with you what is on their minds, what are they working on, what are their concerns. And then we will open it up to that conversation, to Q&A. So I don't want to hold it up any longer. So Drew, Limecooler, why don't you just begin?
Sure. Thank you, Stu. My name is Drew Limecooler. I'm the Senior Executive Director for Estimating and Pricing for Raytheon Technologies, specifically the Raytheon Missile and Defense Division. I've been with Raytheon for over 25 years, having many different positions, everything from accounting, financial planning and analysis. I led the contracts to cash organization, and recently, or the last 2 years now, I've been leading the estimating and pricing group. Our group is made up of about 150 professionals. To give you some context, we did over 1,000 proposals last year in total value of about $26 billion. Out of that, about 30% of them were 15-2 proposals, so a decent number of proposals, 15-2 proposals.
Nancy?
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Nancy Gunderson. I'm the Director of Contracts for Naval Information Warfare Systems Command. Some of you might remember it as Space and Warfare Systems Command, or SPAWAR. So we're centered here in San Diego, so welcome to America's finest city if you're not from around here as well. It's a great place to stay, and sorry about the June gloom this morning. But so I've been the Director of Contracts out here for about 7.5 years already, since about February 2015. And in my career, we talked a little bit backstage. I moved around a little bit. I came back to the Navy from the Department of Health and Human Services, where I served as a Deputy Assistant Secretary there for grants and acquisition. But I really started my career, so it's nice to be back here in San Diego, where we're really close to the Navy. I started my career in the Navy at Naval Air Systems Command, and then moved on to Naval Sea Systems Command, and I did a few other things in between, which is when I met Stu, so earlier in my career. So a little bit about NAVWAR and what we do. The way the Navy distributes its contracting authorities is through its systems commands, or SysComs, and each have a unique portfolio and set of responsibilities and programs that they support. So for example, when I was at NAVWAR, I bought not torpedoes, that was NAVC. I bought missiles, so I probably bought them from you. Torpedoes that go under the sea, I did that at NAVC. And here at NAVWAR, we support essentially the Navy's connected tissue, the networks, the systems, everything that keeps the Navy cyber resilient and connected and communicating, what we say, from seabed to space. So within my command, we spend about $6.5 billion annually across about 13,000 transactions and through about 300 contract specialists and contracting officers, either at our headquarters organization, which is again headquartered here in San Diego. We also have offices on the East Coast. And then we have two warfare centers, one also here in San Diego up on Point Loma, which has a fabulous view when they're in the office, and then another one in Charleston, which is now where Stuart is, so I hope to see him next time I get to travel out there. So that's a little bit about us and our command. I mentioned we spend about $6.5 billion annually, and maybe this will touch on some challenges we'll talk about in the future. At this time, we've really only obligated about $3.6 billion. So you can imagine we're quickly facing the fourth quarter of the fiscal year and have about $3 billion to go in 3 months' time. So I think that's our challenge, to say the least. So anyway, I'll turn it over.
Thanks, Nancy. Good morning, everybody. Megan Dake. I am the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Procurement. I am now the DASSP, and I have some hard shoes to fill.
That's an awesome job.
Stu had. So I've been in the job for about a year. I was acting for about 6 months, and I've been the real thing for about 6 months. So it's been really great. I have a great team. There are 6 heads of contracting activities. I serve as one of them as the Enterprise HCA, and then so those are the actual leaders in the Army contracting that are executing contracts in the Army. So I have a great leadership team. So I'm responsible for really promulgating Army contracting policy and also oversee the execution of Army contract execution. So also one of my biggest roles that I take really seriously is the functional career chief of the contracting career field. And so really that's taking the care and feeding of the contracting professional. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that when we kind of go around and some of the questions. But that's with the change in some of the acquisition certifications for the contracting career field and the other career fields with Back to Basics. It's been a huge opportunity and one of the challenges where we can take the Army has taken an opportunity to really do more mission-focused training. But back to what we do in the Army is we have a very diverse portfolio. We buy tanks, we buy missiles, we deal a lot with your portfolio, with Raytheon and Drew, and we do a lot of construction. We execute about 100, and I think it's about 120 billion a year. We have a lot of work to do this fourth quarter. We do a lot of services, logistics. This year has been extremely busy. We have been doing all the contracting for COVID since 2020. We've executed about 65 billion for the COVID fight, for working with OSD and HHS. The Army, a lot of you may or may not know, but the Army Contracting Enterprise has been doing most of the, not all, but most of the contracting for COVID with the vaccine. So we've been doing some very different type of contracting that Army contracting is not used to doing. And through the use of OTs, commercial solutions openings, and some very different type of contracting solutions. And also with the drawdown in Afghanistan and obviously with the fight in Ukraine. So it's been an extremely busy year on top of our normal type of op tempo with just our normal, supporting the Army mission. I love my job. I have a great leadership team and a great leadership. And we have some very important priorities to execute and support. The Secretary of the Army has laid out her priorities. Climate is one of them. People is our #1 priority, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go around the room. And within Army contracting, I have some very important things that we're going to do and how we're going to get about some of our talent management initiatives. So over to you, Natalie.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Stu, for inviting me to sit on this panel. So I'm Natalie Riedel. I'm the Director of Contracting for Space Systems Command. You all had the pleasure of hearing Miss Joy White yesterday as the keynote speaker. So Joy is my boss, and she is absolutely fabulous to work for. So as all of you can imagine, we've got some great priorities, and she highlighted the threat. And I'll tell you that our number one goal at Space Systems Command is to prepare our workforce to get after that 2026 fight. So that's our number one priority. A little about myself. I've only been in this role for 10 months. Prior to this role, I was at the Department of the Air Force Rapid Capabilities Office at Joint Base Anacostia Bowling on the East Coast. I was there for 5 years, and then I just recently moved out to LA in July of 2021. So fairly new to this role. Prior to that, I was at SMC, Space and Missile Systems Center, for about 15 years. So I have been in space acquisitions for a total of almost 17 years in my military career, and then as a contractor briefly, and then now as a civilian. So I've worn all three hats. So if you have any questions regarding that, I'd be happy to answer it. So I've only been here for about 10 months in this role, and so far lots of challenges. So in my tenure as the Director of Contracting, we have stood up a new command. We are now Space Systems Command. We have welcomed a new commander, General Gutlein, our new 3-star, and we have gone through a major realignment, so we've shifted over to mission areas. So we now have 5 PEOs, and I know Ms. White talked a little bit about this yesterday, but significant changes happening. Space is very dynamic right now, and so we are rapidly trying to adapt and adjust to make sure that we can deliver the capabilities necessary for the fight. So thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Now you know why I'm somewhat humbled to be on the stage with them. So now I'd like each of them to share with you where their focus is and what possibly keeps them up at night on your behalf. So, Drew, would you like to start?
Sure. Many things keep me up at night, including the Celtics losing Game 6.
Well, I always
or winning Game 6 tomorrow night.
I always like what Mad Dog Mattis said when he was Secretary of Defense. Somebody asked him the same question, what keeps you up at night? And he says, nothing keeps me up at night. I keep people up at night.
That's a good line. I like that. But Stu, in what keeps me up at night from a work perspective, I mean, there's really 3 really big things that keep me up. One is compliance. I mean, that's always on my mind about everything we do from an estimating and pricing perspective. We're in the middle of an estimating system audit, so obviously that's weighing heavily on me and making sure that we pass that audit, and so that's important. But from a compliance perspective, making sure all the proposals that we put out go out in a compliant fashion. Having that battle with the other functions within Raytheon, and that they don't sometimes understand why we need to do another check, why we need to review again, and that making sure that they understand that importance, and making also sure that my team is up to date on all the compliance rules, because they're constantly changing, and like I said, we're trying to make sure that what we produce is a compliant product. The second piece, or the second challenge, is the people. My organization, we have quite a few openings. I'm sure most people do here. And it seems like we fill 1 and 2 leave. And so right now in the work environment that we're working through, it's just a constant churn. So between filling those positions, training those folks, always a challenge. The other big piece is we have a portion of my organization is working classified proposals. So they're on site. And now I have that constant battle between how do you keep them happy versus the other folks who are still working from home. So that's a challenge that we have, that again, keeps me up at night. The other piece of this is the training aspect. Again, keeping my team up to date on the new regulations, new tools. We just went live with ProPricer this month. So yes. So the training and getting ready for that, the conversion from our homegrown tool to the pricing tool has been a challenge. I think the other piece of the people puzzle is the respect. We, as my pricing organizations, I always have to fight for them to get that respect within the organizations, across whether it's contracts or across other finance functions. And so that people understand how important that role is, and I'm trying to recruit people into estimating and pricing. A lot of people don't want to come to estimating and pricing. They see it as they'd rather work on the program, or they would rather work in FP&A, and trying to sell that organization. And then, like I said, trying to make sure that my team has the respect that they deserve, because they are an awesome team. The third piece, the third challenge that we face, and I think we can all agree on this, is just the collaboration. Collaboration with other functions within internally to Raytheon, collaboration with our partners in the government. It's important that we work together. When we work together, things run so much smoother. We've tried different acquisition methods. We've tried 890s. We've tried alpha proposals, and when we've collaborated, set the ground rules up front, those worked great. We were able to really accelerate the acquisition process. When we didn't collaborate and we all kind of said, okay, we're going to do this, and didn't work together, we would hit roadblocks. And as soon as we did that, we'd fall back onto the FAR, and the process would actually end up taking longer than if we had just gone down a traditional route. So that collaboration was key. I think the collaboration with our partners for draft RFPs. I mean, if we were to do more draft RFPs and then hold to those when we put together that draft, that would allow us to get started earlier. That would allow us to start engaging our suppliers on quotes faster. Many times, though, we do a draft RFP and then the requirements change, and after the RFP comes out, or during the proposal process, and that just leads to, again, lengthened acquisition times. We need to hold to those numbers that we were set and work for that. And so when we do that draft RFP and work together, specifically on the 15-2 proposals, make sure that the quantities that are set make sense from a budget perspective. I know everyone thinks they can acquire 1,000, but if your budget's only 10, I mean, don't have us go price out 1,000 when that's just going to be a waste of everyone's time. When we go to set the draft RFP, let's think of number of quantities. I mean, can we price only 2 points and then settle on a curving methodology between those points to allow us to, and rather than going out and getting pricing for 10 to 12 different points within our proposal. Again, just a lot of churn, unnecessary churn that we could find a better solution for. I think the last piece of collaboration is just using technology. If we can collaborate better and utilize the technology that we have at hand. Again, that's why we're so excited about going on ProPricer, that hopefully we can utilize, both parties can utilize that tool to evaluate the proposals faster. Get to what's the real meaning of what do they want to review? What do you want to review? Many times we produce a ton of cost and pricing data that just gets pushed to the side and not even utilized in negotiations. And it was kind of like, okay, well, that was great, we did that, we checked the box on that. But if that wasn't going to be utilized and that wasn't going to be used, could we have figured out a better solution, a faster solution to get through this? We talked earlier, we were talking back there about how sometimes negotiations just last forever, for over a year on certain products. I mean, we got to figure out how to do that faster. I mean, no one wins when we take that long. We don't win, you don't win, the warfighter doesn't win. So we need to collaborate and get our products to that warfighter faster.
Well, thank you, Drew. Hopefully you can get a nap today.
I'll try.
With all that going on. Nancy?
I was sitting here absorbing everything that Drew was saying, and it's amazing, across industry, and then we were talking a little bit backstage, we're all going through the same thing. And I'd say my biggest challenge, and I touched upon, the $3 or so billion we still have yet to spend for the fiscal year, but, it takes the workforce to do that. So my biggest challenge is that, organizational dynamic of a workforce that is, overworked, very stressed out, getting all sorts of, different signals, whether they be a demand signal from their customer as to an ever-changing priority, or a signal to come back into the office and come out of the COVID environment and that sort of thing. So we're going through a lot of organizational churn, and it feels like we all are across the organization. Maybe misery loves company. I don't know what the right expression would be for that. But I'm looking at a couple of my team members here too, who I know are going. they're going through it, and it's a lot of work. So our programs portfolios continue to grow and grow and grow, and we recently, over the last year and a half, faced a workforce reduction initiative, which was probably never a good thing to go through, and certainly not good timing. And now we've come through that, and the good news is I got my end strength authorizations back. The bad news is now I have a bunch of vacancies, and I'm fighting with all these people to fill them, and trying to woo those resources. So I think that it's a challenge for everybody to staff up and resource and find the right people for the right job and make sure they're doing well, they're supported by the technology, they're supporting by their leadership, and they're able to perform and meet the customer's mission. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all here for, to support a mission. And each of ours are very, very compelling. And that's what, as a public servant throughout my career, that's what always drew me to doing contracting and acquisition, is that call to the mission, and you find a value in that. So one of the things we're working on within our command under our strategic vector is what we're calling inspiring a mission mindset. And that's bringing back connection to the mission. So everybody across the organization, across one NAVWAR, no matter who they are or where they are, they know what they're doing in support of the mission, and they feel that connection to the fleet and to the mission and to the sailor and the Marines out there. So we think that's where we might have a competitive edge against maybe an industry partner, not necessarily Raytheon, but the Googles and the Apples and the others out there who are fighting for the same talent because of that call to mission. So we're always striving to do something different or new, and trying to get to either the negotiation table faster, get that RFP out, stick to our evaluation timelines, and get to that contract award. I know one of my PCOs is here, and she came up with a very ingenious way to waive the TINA requirements. So we were able to move without a proposal and without a solicitation to award some follow-on buys that met, for her program, which is a MIDS program, the crypto monetization efforts. So all of our programs are facing looming deadlines and their own imperatives. So we're trying everything we can do to be innovative, to get to that table and get to contract award sooner rather than later, because we're always late before we get started. So
Sure.
Anyway, that's probably enough babbling from me.
I mean,
Megan?
still connecting that vector, because I think that's important. So two things kind of keep me up at night, and I think our Army leadership, one is the people. People is our number one priority in the Army, because we need the people to do our mission. And that connecting to the mission, especially in contracting, because they need to know that especially in contracting, that what they do every day is directly connecting to the mission. It's not just working in SBS or PADS, doing a contract mod, incremental funding. You're actually enabling that mission to get done. But sometimes you just don't see that. So we're working on that too, but I like that vector piece, so I may steal a little bit of that. So I remember when I was at Marine Corps. So, so the talent management piece is one thing we're working a lot on. So we're developing a career mapping tool so we can work on our, early on, identify the preferences and those talent management early on, and identifying those key skills and attributes of an individual. So the individual can self-identify those, and then the supervisor and then the leader, a supervisor, manager, and the leader can kind of see what their workforce looks like. And so it kind of gives them the roadmap to what your organization looks like. So it's in early stages. We kind of have a minimal viable product. So that's one way the contracting enterprise can see ourselves. So what we want to do is leverage that for the entire Army. And it's a solution that will allow us to manage our talent. So that's one way we're actually developing this for the contracting career field. So that's one thing I'm really, really excited about, because this will allow us to manage our talent, identify, like, if you have tendencies towards the cost and pricing career field, you like to deal with a lot of data, you really are great with spreadsheets, you can self-identify that and kind of more go into that earlier, where you're maybe an earlier contract specialist. So that's one way. But the people piece, getting burned out early, the Army has had tremendous workload and mission requirements, especially this year, but it just seems like it's always something. And to balance that with, budget cuts And we need to really balance that with COVID, work-life balance. And so it's a constant balance. And then also the second piece is our priority is speed. Getting the modernization priorities of the Army, especially within ASALT, who is my organization that I directly support, is getting the modernization priorities within the acquisition area and getting those done as soon as possible, using those authorities the Congress has given us, and getting those done as quickly as we can, balancing that with some risk and using every authority that we can, but not burning out the workforce. And that is a constant kind of that balance. Within the contracting workforce, the program management, the requirements activities. So it's a constant balance. And so you have to look at your workforce and what are your priorities. So those are my kind of two things as a contracting leader that I have to work with my leadership. And as these world events happen, we have to constantly look at, okay, what can we kind of maybe push aside a little bit. Ukraine, we are, working on a lot of things that we didn't have, 8 months ago that are, more near term, that are, replenishment based on the events in Russia and Ukraine right now that we didn't have that we now are doing on procurements. So those are probably the two biggest things we're working right now in the procurement community, but taking care of our people, our talent management initiatives, and I have a long list, probably of 20. And I work with our leadership team. We have a Army Contracting Enterprise. I don't know if we started it when you were here, Stu. The executive committee that we work with across our senior contracting officials and our HCAs, that we talk about the talent management initiatives and these different priorities. We talk about our 51 Charlies, which are our military contracting folks, and our civilian talent management things that we want to focus on, as well as just different priorities. So, that's kind of what we've been. And then I work with our acquisition and Army leadership to kind of help me manage those. I don't obviously do that in a silo, so.
Well, thank you, Megan. Natalie?
Thanks, Megan. Well, the challenge with going last here is that my colleagues here have taken all of my talking points, but
but that's not a bad thing.
Absolutely great points. It's I guess refreshing to know that we're all kind of struggling with the same challenges. But absolutely, number one is people, and I'll take just a minute to brag on my folks. So I've got an outstanding contracting workforce, very solid pricing team. Got my chief of pricing here, Miss Melissa DeWong, absolutely fantastic, And we have about $11 billion in our budget. We have 25 upcoming source selections and about roughly 470 contracts at this point. And so we have about 60 PCOs managing that whole workload. So very lean, agile teams, almost 400 folks total, but only 60 PCOs. So we've got a robust team working very hard. So I can understand the challenges that you mentioned, and we are also seeing the same, the contracting workforce getting burnt out, lots and lots of new ideas coming down. We've got 5 PEOs that we support, which is wonderful, but can also be challenging as we work toward what is the most important priority. And so my job is to make sure that we're clearly prioritizing for the contracting workforce so that they have some direction and some guidance. So the number one challenge I've had so far is hiring that talent. They call it the war on talent. And Drew, I echo your point. We are sharing the same pool of resources, so it's a bit of a zero-sum game here if we're not careful. So we have a very robust training program, not only in contracting, but also at Space Systems Command to train up our folks. And it takes a good 4 to 5 years to train a contracting professional. And I encourage you, if you look through my bio, you won't see Pricer anywhere, full disclosure, on my bio. However, I was trained, in the classical acquisition where we didn't get a Pricer. You were to learn your pricing skills and learn your craft. And so I have done my fair share of pricing, just enough to be dangerous. And I'll tell you that you are going to need those pricing skills. Just last week, I did a clearance I see Mr. Ron Ortiz on the front row. And I did it, I was TDY on my lunch break with a calculator and a whiteboard. And luckily I understood enough to pull together the geometry and to approve the clearance. So let me tell you, you will need these skills for the rest of your career. So people, supporting my team, hiring, getting the right talent in so that we can deliver the capabilities and support our PEOs, #1 priority. The second thing is, Drew mentioned collaboration. 100% agree. We've got to redefine our relationship with industry and as well as our internal program teams. So if you're on my team, you've heard me say this many, many times, it's important to have that internal collaboration. So contracting and pricing are not one function. They're not staying in their lane anymore. We can't just wait until the requirement's done and the acquisition strategy is approved and we're just waiting to issue our RFP. We've got to get involved up front, be plugged in, understand what you're buying, and work up front to collaborate with the contractors. There's this mindset that we shouldn't be collaborating with contractors. Once the market research report is finalized, that's it. Not true. That's not written down anywhere. Until your RFP is issued, we need contractors. We need your input. We need your help. Respond to our draft RFPs. Provide those comments, and then provide good, solid proposals so we can move quickly. As Megan mentioned, #1 is speed. We've got to go fast. And in this environment, it's absolutely critical. And so we've got to partner together to make sure we can move quickly and also have that acquisition discipline.
Yeah.
Well,
Stu,
thank you.
If I could add one thing too.
Yes.
To Natalie. So, that's a great point too. So the Army has, and I think it started too when you were the DESIP, we have an understanding industry course, and I don't think it's just with the Army. I think the Navy does something.
We stole it from the Navy.
Yeah, we stole it from the Navy, and I think we have it at a little bit more senior level to our senior acquisition officers, GOs and SESs, but we're actually going to steal your idea, bring it down to more the 06, 14s, and 15s. An understanding industry course where we actually try to really understand how industry, the behaviors of industry. So we can have better relationships and understand the behaviors, both from a private and public sector, so we can build better business deals. We understand that the whole, we don't want you to earn an honest profit is over, because we need industry to meet our mission. I mean, I think that's unknown. And so if you ever meet a contracting officer, and I'm speaking to industry here, that doesn't earn honest profit, go to their leadership, because that myth should be thrown out the window. So we do want, we do need to get a fair and reasonable price, obviously. So we do want to seek to understand your behaviors, and I think COVID has shown us, kind of wacky behaviors, not sure, in industry. We're still trying to understand them, whatever right looks like, and obviously the economy now is really, really wacky. It's out of whack with supply chain, inflation, labor shortages, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit here.
Yeah, we got some questions
Maybe
for
that's a good segue. So everything's really out of whack, but we do want to understand industry, and there's small businesses, there's non-traditionals, there's private sectors, there's industry mergers. So because we have to have a relationship with industry to do whether you're a big or small or medium-sized company, so.
Well, thank you, and for your introductory remarks. And if anything that you take from these first initial introductory remarks is how important you are. So when you're down and you feel overwhelmed, know that you're loved and you're appreciated, right? So with that, they're on the minds of many of you, and to the panelists, I have lots of questions. So if your question does not get answered or asked during this segment, please, I know many of them are going to be around for the remainder of today and possibly tomorrow. Don't be shy. Walk up, introduce yourself, and ask your question, because as you can tell, they have a lot they want to say and share with you. So with that on the mind of many, coming out of the last couple of years has been about COVID and how are we dealing with that challenge. So there was a question that said, what are your top 2 challenges that came to the surface from COVID? and how are you addressing those challenges? So with that, why don't we start with you, Natalie?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So COVID has really, changed the work environment completely. I think probably the number one is the telework environment. Some folks are more comfortable with telework than others, and we're 2.5 years into this, and that's still the case. And so where do we go from here? Do we bring everyone back into the office, or do we start allowing more telework and more remote work? And so full disclosure, Space Systems Command does not have an official approved telework policy, but we are working on it. And in the interim, we've been given approval to have some telework and some remote. It's on a case-by-case basis right now. But really, the biggest challenge is connecting to that workforce. So especially some of the junior folks that we bring in and we're trying to train, especially with contracting and pricing skills, it can be really difficult to connect to the mission. So Megan mentioned the connecting to the mission. How do you get folks to do that when you're teleworking, when you're 2 or 3 hours potentially, if they're remote, separate? It can be a challenge, and I can tell you that we have struggled with that. And all the leadership has also struggled with what's the right answer, what's the balance in getting our folks trained so that they can become PCOs or KOs and really be effective. So I think we're still working on that, but that's definitely one of the outcomes of COVID. So that's probably our biggest challenge.
Nancy, would you like to?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's very, very similar, and we never knew when we locked down, went home that March day, that we weren't really going to come back right away.
And they canceled the NCAA tournament.
They canceled they canceled the cookie handout we were going to do from around, so those were, lots of things, was happening. It was just strange, just realizing you weren't going to come back and the lockdown wasn't going to be a 2, 3, 4 week endeavor. And here we are 2.5 or so years later, coming through that, learning that we can work remotely and then we can work effectively via telework and of course within the Navy, and I know many across the department all implemented the Teams environment and those sorts of things. And that took a little while to deliver. It's actually one of the programs we support, one of our PEO support, deliver that to the Navy. So we're a little, bipolar that way, I guess, doing it and then receiving it. So I'd like to think we've come through it, but we're struggling, in terms of having adapted and adopted. But I think we are realizing, again, that connectedness to the mission and to each other has dropped a little bit. We've started to bring people back to the office 2 days, a pay period, so 2 days every 2 weeks. And there was some reticence to that. There was also some excitement to that. So depending on who they were and what they wanted. And we had, honestly, some people who were quite delighted to come back to the office because they had joined our organization during COVID. And that was the first time they ever saw their coworkers or a contract specialist, in person, met the PCO they were supporting this whole time and that sort of thing. And I've got a lady here in the front row who graduated from our intern program during that whole event. So, developing that workforce in this, more hybrid environment now, I think is our challenge moving forward.
Well, I'd like to, I know that we could add an awful lot about this, but I'd like Megan and you and Drew to put on notice. I'm going to call on you because one of the most popular questions out there right now is that you can't deny that where is our economic situation right now with inflation. And the question is how should inflationary assumptions be evaluated when determining price reasonableness and a source selection? So, Drew, start, and then I'll come to you, Megan, on how is the Army addressing that? So how are you addressing the inflationary assumptions?
It's a great question, and I wish I had the answer. Again, it leans back on collaboration. We're looking for that kind of Rosetta Stone. We're looking for that answer. There's a lot of questions out there of how to address this. I mean, EPA clauses are obviously an answer, and I know there's a session right after this to actually go over all of that, and that's going to be a great session. But that's got to be utilized, and that's got to be utilized so we can flow that down as a prime to our subcontractors, because they're refusing to quote us in some cases because they're afraid of the inflation. Or when they give us quotes, they expire in 5 days, and it's kind of like, okay, thanks. So it's working with our customer to help have them give us tools that we can flow down to our supply base, I think would be a great start, and that's what we need to work with.
Yeah, because it's in your span of control, right?
Yeah,
What things are in your span of control? Megan, what is the Army?
So I think, so it's a really good question, and it's a little bit of a loaded question, because I think you have to look at it, and we are dealing with this, right? You have to look at it, so what type of contract is it? Like what industry, what type of requirement, what is it a cost contract? I'm assuming it's going to be a new contract, right? Because current contracts are a little, like, is it a mod on a contract? So, and then has the, because it is a little bit of a cultural change within the Army. Even our new contracts, we have to say, hey, you need to adjust the IGCE for inflation, right? This is, because we don't know how long inflation is going to last. So, because inflation is different depending on the indices, right? If it's labor, if it's, depending on what type of product, material, raw material. So we do have to adjust for it, obviously. I mean, there are discussions within Army leadership, it was earlier this week, within OSD, and then up on the Hill about how do we adjust within our budget, right? And then can we get what we need within our own buying power? Within future budgets. And so I'm not sure how that's all going to play out, but it all really depends on what are we talking about? What are we buying? It's not across the board. It's not a cookie cutter approach to it. So it's that's why I say it's a loaded question. So it is something, depends on where you're talking about. We also have some of the things that affect that are supply chain. We're still, COVID is still impacting some of our areas, labor shortages. So it's not just inflation, it's all these other economic things, issues that are infecting it. So inflation is definitely one of those. And so that's why it's such a complicated issue. And it's also, that's why I talk about indices. And then we talk about EPA clauses.
Right.
It's not a cookie cutter. EPA clauses are
right.
very complicated. And the contracting workforce haven't used EPA clauses in like 40 years.
I know.
I don't think any of us. Like, we're not baby boomers, so we're not ready to get out of the way, which is I meant to use in my intro. We're like probably more, what are we, Gen X?
Yeah.
We're probably Gen X. You're probably maybe even a little younger. But I don't think I've ever used an EPA clause in a contract. So
once, yeah.
maybe once, like but so it's really you have to, and so we have to educate the workforce. So, and OSD, I think John Tenaglia's team is here, has put out some really good, I think DAU has a new class for the workforce to start training up on those, because we do have to start looking at where are they appropriate for our new contracts going forward.
Well, I appreciate that, and I hope you don't get off the bus as a bus driver, because there's nothing more scarier than being on a bus when the bus driver gets off and says, I've had it. Right? Another question that was asked a lot of, and there's been some deliberation over this and debate on emerging discussion about skills-based hiring versus degree requirements. And so how important are degree requirements to job performance in your view, Nancy?
Oh, that's another loaded question. So we all kind of have our personal opinion about it. Yeah. So, and thinking about, when I started the career, in the career field, that's when DIWEA first got started. And the whole concept of you need to have a degree. I agree, you have to have a degree. With DIWEA, they've since gotten rid of the 24-hour business credit thing, which I didn't have when I first entered the workforce and, had to catch up with. So truth be told, I was a French major. I did economics too, so I think in this career field, it's very liberal arts in a way. I mean, you need a little bit of everything and not, it's not only mathematics, it's not only analytics and that sort of thing. It's really those critical thinking skills. So to say somebody needs, 24-hour, hours of business credit or something is, I was never a strong believer in that. That's why a loaded question. So we look for people who can critically think and assess the situation and the market and understand, how to make those connection points come together into a solution. And those innovators and that I mentioned we have out here in the room too. But so I'm not per se in our career for looking for the degree. It is a check mark, but we look for kind of the wholeness of the person and what else they can bring to the table in terms of that, ability to collaborate. And again, I can't emphasize enough that critical thinking skill that we need. But, so I do kind of refer to our career field as much more of a liberal arts degree than a business or whatever degree.
Skills.
Communication skills are huge.
Natalie, I mean, former military and now as a senior executive servant, what are your thoughts on this debate?
Yeah, so I agree. Definitely critical thinking skills, communication skills, so very important. I had a gal come to me just recently, and she didn't have a business degree, but she had worked for a financial advisor for many, many years. And she said, I think what you do is so interesting. How do I get involved? And she would be fantastic at pricing. She definitely has a great command of numbers. And so I looked up, I tried to find an avenue. How can we get you hired? But she didn't have a business degree, and she only had a 2-year associate's degree. And I just could not find an avenue. It was a little disturbing because I think she would be fantastic. But so I say all that I think the person has got to be well-rounded. Those skills doesn't necessarily have to check a box, but we've got to look at the whole person and move toward that. And I was talking to Major General Cameron Holt yesterday, and he mentioned, we've shifted a lot of our focus in hiring to STEM, right? So putting so much emphasis on STEM, similar to how China is doing. But that's not necessarily the American way. And so he mentioned that, we pride ourselves on choosing, whether you want to be a history major or an English major or liberal arts, all of that combined is what makes our country strong. And we don't want to force our folks to do STEM when maybe they could use their, artistic ability to do something similar, but also support, our mission. So just making sure that we're not being too strong about forcing folks, because that's, that our strength comes from our diversity here.
Yeah, I was going to say in undergrad, there may not be a degree for contracting or a degree for price, but many times you'll have that degree for business management that talks about the importance of relationships. And we've heard that here, talked about them. I'd like to transition, Drew, now. This is going to be, you must have a target on your chest right here. So I'll try to be, but some of the attendees, both virtually and here in person, have heard that industry has an issue with submitting constant pricing data or certifying to that constant pricing data. And can you help us understand why is it problematic for industry to provide the government with the constant pricing data needed to negotiate a fair and reasonable award?
Yeah, I don't say we have an issue with it. I mean, it gets back to my point earlier. I mean, if we provide it, we want it to be used. And if it's not going to be utilized, then it was a waste of time. I mean, it takes a lot to gather that information and to gather the information and to certify it. Now, if we can find other ways to analyze the data that would satisfy the government, I mean, I think that's what we need to explore. Again, it's not that we don't want to give, and we're not hiding anything, and we're very open about what we're trying to achieve. It's just that it takes a lot of data. And the other piece is it puts a lot of stress on our suppliers. From a Raytheon perspective, us certifying our costs our piece of the cost is not that difficult. When we go down to our supply base, and especially those smaller businesses who struggle with it and struggle to whether they have approved rates or in just gathering that data and having that data available puts them at a disadvantage. And a lot of times they just walk away. They say, we can't yes, we can deliver you the product, Raytheon, but we can't give you the certification of our cost. So unfortunately, we can't bid. And that's a challenge. I mean, there's a great supplier that we just lost because of a requirement versus working with them and saying, okay, is there an alternative method that we could utilize for government to analyze those costs?
Yeah, I saw your eyes light up when I mentioned Tina Waiver.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
it was like,
great.
Yeah, I was just going to
you
ask.
saw a rainbow go over
On the
it.
other side
Yeah.
of the coin here, you three, what are your thoughts in the requesting of how much cost and pricing data is needed to meet that faster, better, cheaper kind of cliche that's out there? Would one of you like to address that?
Either way.
And Natalie, I know that you've got some of those in that or
Well, I'll let you guys,
ballpark.
because you're more on the executing side. I mean, I've got my thoughts, but
Well, Natalie, why don't you go first and we'll
the
come back
Tina
to
waivers
Megan.
come to me.
So the TINA waivers, yeah, also come to me. So I have to sign off on those TINA waivers. And I would say that the most I've seen so far are when we have disagreements in commercial pricing. So whether it's a commercial item or not. So it's the great debate, right? And how much is enough and where is that line? So we've had a couple instances where we will disagree, we don't believe that it is commercial, or there just wasn't enough data provided. So I think my answer back would be, if you can provide the justification, that helps us with our justification, writing that up so that we can determine that it's a commercial item. And if you can provide that, that will help us tremendously. But that's usually where I see, we'll have to come, if we just don't have enough time, we'll potentially pursue a TINA waiver.
Megan?
Well, I see your point, Drew, is when you provide data and the government doesn't use it.
Right.
I've actually seen that
Yeah.
happen. That's very frustrating. And I honestly don't know if it's just more because they were able to come to a position and they didn't need it, because I know it's a lot of work. I think it's where it takes 6-9 months to get a qualifying proposal. That's where, and that does happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it has happened. So I think because that's where that time does take, and that's very frustrating. So I think that's what we're really talking about. But the whole, the qualifying, I mean, the TINA, that is a problem. So we've got John Tenaglia in the audience. So
We do.
we're not going to put John on the spot.
We won't pull John out of the audience.
There is the TINA Light program
We'll
pilot.
let him do that in the
We won't
hallway.
put John on the spot.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Hello.
'Cause
John,
we
do
do
you
have
want to
the
raise
TINA
your
Light
arm so they all know what you look like?
I'm sorry, John.
This is a question that I think is well stated too, is that proposal cycle times to submit proposals continue to be a challenge. And you alluded that, like getting your subcontractors and getting those that give you proposals to hold that. But what has industry done to accelerate the process, especially with major suppliers? And then what is the agencies doing to accelerate their evaluation of those proposals? So, Drew, I'll let you go first, and then I will talk to the leaders of.
I mentioned in my opening remarks, I mean, the utilization of draft RFPs. I mean, if we can get a draft and we can engage our supply base earlier, that's key in accelerating the process. Again, the quantity points are always a point of contention. Like if we go out to our supply base and say, hey, can you give us a price and cost and pricing data for these 12 or 15 data points, that's when they kind of balk. But where we can where we work with the customer and say, let's do 2 or 3, and that would accelerate that process. I think they're the key things, and again, the collaboration and early in letting us engage early with our supply base is important.
So Nancy, what do you do once he has accelerated as much as he can to give you a proposal? How do you accelerate process?
It's really about that collaboration. Even with COVID, we found out we were able to still sequester people virtually and do source elections and things like that. But I mean, the true accelerator is, everybody, all of my PCOs and specialists have more than one program and more than one contract, but trying to take away the other workload and things they're doing so they can focus in on that one procurement or that one action is really the biggest thing we can do for the workforce is to kind of remove some of the other barriers to their being able to focus. But it really comes down to the collaboration with the technical team and making sure, we do have the right technical team in the room to do their side of the evaluation, and then my contract specialists and PCOs, can work with DCMA and DCAA effectively. So it is, on the sole source side, it's getting more and more protracted to meet those timelines in terms of receiving a timely proposal. We've seen a delay on our sole source side, and then getting the DCMA and DCA, and so it's really, it's a challenge, to be sure, in terms of getting everybody in sync and online and keep going, because it's hard. We do about, in our command, we do about 70% of our dollars through competition. So we're getting, better and better about finding ways to speed through the cost realism process. We do a lot of cost type contracts over price realism. So, we're getting better at that in terms of those accelerators and finding new, ways to streamline our cost realism processes or standardize them to a degree, especially on the repetitive services type awards and those sorts of things. But it all comes down to having the right data and then the right team that can just really focus and sequester their time and effort towards that one endeavor.
Natalie?
So two thoughts on this. First is tailoring. I think it starts even earlier with the RFP. So getting that tailoring, making sure that we're only getting the data that we need so our tech eval team can focus right in and deliver us a product in a timely manner. So the second thing is training. So we have a pretty robust tech eval training that we provide. Our pricing team actually helps provide that to our program managers on exactly what we're looking for to put together our negotiation position. So this is exactly what we're gonna need. And so it's starting to draw down those times, but it is always a challenge.
Well, in the lieu of time here, Megan, I know that we have not addressed machine learning, artificial intelligence, and Nancy just talked about how we want to take off some of those kind of tasks that you are facing that you don't need to spend as much time on if you can rely on machine learning or artificial intelligence to do that for you. What is the Army doing to address, machine learning or artificial intelligence?
So I really want to answer the end of that one, but that's okay. But because I had a good answer to it, but that's okay. I have hopefully a good answer to this one. So we're looking at artificial intelligence. We've developed some bots to take some of the pretty simple manual tasks. We have a Dora bot right now. It's actually been used
We use it
across the Army,
Yep.
Navy,
Yep.
U.S. Transcom. It's the termination and responsibility assistant. It actually goes and checks for the responsibility of a contractor throughout the contracting process, and make sure that the responsibility determination is done. We've got some other bots in process, and it does that for the KO. And we've got a lot of different activities because we talked yesterday in the panel up here. You can use AI and some of this automation to do some of those, I wouldn't say remedial because they're important tasks, but those non-thinking things that you can just go check those websites and some of those other things. And so we have a paperless contract file where we can just go check those things and file it in our paperless contract file. And so when you go and do your compliance check, it's done, it's there. So some of those things that you contract specialists or KO can forget to do, and then you get that little red check when you do your compliance because they forgot to do it, because you have to do it 3 times during the contract process. And then they can use their brain cells for some of the more complex, right in that PNM or right in that business clearance, or on that phone with the contractor negotiating, or some of those where you want to use the brain power. So we've got a lot of different initiatives. We're working with DPC on some initiatives across the department where we're using automation really as our friend and using technology. So a lot of it's resources, time, and just collaboration across the department, because we all do the same process, sometimes a little differently just because we're doing different contracting for different requirements, but we're hoping to use a lot of these tools across the enterprise, though.
So we're out of time, but I want you to have an opportunity to summarize anything that you may have missed. I know, Megan, you wanted to add something to the initiatives to evaluate proposals received by the Army. So wherever you may want to go with your little summary, let me give you that time. So Megan, would you like to go first while it's fresh maybe on your mind on that answer on proposal evaluations?
Or, I mean, Natalie can go.
Okay.
So I think just my closing remarks, I would say, learn your craft, learn it well. If you're in pricing, go out to the execution side on, and do a negotiation, sit on the other side. And if you've been doing that for a while, go try out pricing, increase your skills and learn your craft. And then the second thing is please, please, please don't forget a sense of urgency. That we say acquisition discipline, but it's speed with acquisition discipline. So make sure that you're focused on the speed and focused on the threat, and always tie what you're doing back to the mission.
Megan?
So the only thing I was going to say is that we're using a lot of oral proposals to help. It depends on what type, if we're doing sole source negotiations, oral proposals, but we're also using other transaction authority. Obviously, it's different from FAR Part 15 to get at some of the, everyone thinks OTs are fast. They're not always fast. There's some flexibility in there. They're appropriate for certain types of requirements. But just in closing, I think we talked about that connected to the mission. As a contracting officer or contract specialist, take ownership for your work, whether you're on industry or in the government. Just take ownership for your work. Understand your requirement, have that relationship with your customer, and really, it is a great career field, so just own it. And that's really, it's a great, just love your job. So.
Good. Nancy?
I guess I'll try to take a different tack, but, I'm very much in line with your thinking. We really do invest a lot of time and effort to develop the government contracting workforce. I mentioned our recent intern graduate, and I have a few other staff in here. And they all come with very powerful experiences, through this school of hard knocks called contracting, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really then about them feeling comfortable with being so empowered, with finding the right business solution for their customer and working with their industry partner, in a collaborative way to do so. I guess I can't emphasize enough, we endow with them a lot of responsibility and a lot of authority, and empowered, and then we as leaders need to be there, to help them manage risks and accept the risks that they're taking, and stand behind them if maybe something doesn't work out, or if it works out, then promote it and let others borrow it,
All right. Yeah. Drew?
Yeah, I think we've all said it, and we're at the end of the day, we're trying to do the same thing. Right, we're trying to deliver the best product in the fastest manner for our warfighter, and that's what you're right. We can't forget that, so we got to collaborate. How can we work together? How can we be a team? When we do that, things are great. When we start to accuse each other, that's when things break down, and that's when things come to a halt, and ultimately the warfighter suffers. Right. So that's what we got to keep in mind.
Well, thank you. And I know I opened with applauding you all for the hard work that you do day in, day out. But I think you can see that these four leaders right here are working tirelessly on your behalf. From sun up to sundown. I know they're putting in long days. They flew here just to be here maybe for a couple hours, and then they're going to fly back other trips. And I know Nancy's going to have to deal with traffic, to get around the block. But we really appreciate you all taking the time to come here and share with us, and I wish we could have gotten to all your questions. There's so much here to be said, and I know so please do not be shy, come up to them. But thank you all for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to see you.
All right. Thank you all so much. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah. Hey, Stu, so when is your talk show coming?
Oh, yeah. I think this was it.
And that was awesome, man.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Hey, this was pretty awesome, and I think it would be great to have a round two on and bring some of these folks back as well, but we'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah. So listen, hey, go ahead and take a break. Get ready for your next set of workshops coming up here starting at 10 o'clock. Hey, and please look forward to coming back for the plenary session this afternoon with Major General Cameron Holt and an award presentation. So enjoy lunch, enjoy your workshops. We'll see you soon. Thank you.